Speaker, what do you say to those who criticize filing a budget bill before the governor makes his budget address?
I guess, frankly, I guess I have to ask why it hasn't been done before. I find it puzzling that people assume that we are not supposed to be productive during the interim and get to work immediately. Everybody used to always complain about us waiting the entire month of January before we really got down to business in budget years. And I just think that it is a waste of time to delay a process, which we know is going to happen. The process is going to happen. There's never, at least to my knowledge, never in my history has there been a governor's budget that was passed out of the House just regardless of whether it was a Democratic governor, Democratic House, Republican House, that passed exactly as it was filed. The governor's recommendations are exactly that. They are recommendations. We will absolutely 100% consider his recommendations throughout the process. But I think to wait intentionally, to ignore months of interim work, months of committee work, months of budget review subcommittee work is just, quite frankly, a waste of time.
Thank you. Can you tell us what you think are the most important parts of HB1 for Kentuckians? What do you see as being the main highlights of HB1?
Well, I think that it keeps with our overall principle of being responsible. It did make some very important strategic investments in areas across the scope of the budget. But it also never seemed to lose sight of, at least I don't think, of the fact that these are taxpayer dollars. We tried to use one-time monies for one-time purposes, not to create recurring expenses out of one-time monies. Invested heavily in education. We both K through 12 as well as post-secondary, created significant reserves for infrastructure funding, transferring $200 million of general fund money into the road fund just so we make sure that we have enough money for the federal matches. Appropriated $1.1 billion in other infrastructure money for broadband, water, sewer, those types of things. But all in all, I will tell you that I think that the fact that we once again have chosen, making it a very precise decision to not spend all of the money that we have. Keeping reserves at a record level, making sure that we are able to continue to come out of this pandemic. There's still an incredible amount of uncertainty in the economy. Again, the consensus forecasting group, when they gave us their most recent numbers, acknowledged that significant portions of our revenue, our increase in revenues, were attributable to the federal stimulus money. We know that's the case. So to try to assume how much of that is related is a very difficult process, and we certainly don't want to err on the wrong side of that. So I think that that's why you saw us and have seen us in the past take a very conservative approach to budgeting, and one that is responsible to the taxpayer, but also responsive to the needs of Kentuckians.
Do you still plan to pursue tax code changes, and any more idea on what that might look like?
Not at this point. When I say not at this point, I mean as to what that will look like. Yes, I think that you will see us continue to advance the discussion about comprehensive tax reform, and quite frankly, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to go through the at least this portion of the budgeting process as quickly as possible, because we wanted to see what our reserves were going to be. We wanted to see how these investments may impact Kentucky, and quite frankly, what type of surpluses we may have to be able to build into tax reform. And as I've said a million times, tax reform is built in a vacuum. It's built in a model, and to do so without adequate reserves is irresponsible. And so to get this process accelerated, I think only increases our likelihood of being able to tackle comprehensive tax reform. Excuse me.
Do you have any concerns about the $10 million a year fund for legislators to spend as they please?
Well, it's not as they please. It all has to go through Department of Local Government in the governor's office. And it's for very limited things. And I guess I have concern maybe how it will be perceived initially, but I don't have a concern about the process. My first two budget cycles here in the legislature, at least my first two, 2006, 2008, there was a lot of bonding of tobacco settlement money. And each rep was given the ability to direct some of that money. And it was always in coordination with local officials. And the reason for that was to keep us from making global decisions about local needs, to try to line item every small project that might possibly be necessary in local communities. It's very, very difficult to do that. So to give that flexibility so it doesn't all have to be done, it will allow us to address some local government needs, some local community needs without having to go through the line iteming process.
Can you talk a little bit about funding for full-day kindergarten?
We included it. We thought it was, we made a very strong policy statement on that last year. We thought it was necessary. Our education funding work group came to the conclusion that it was important to continue that. So we felt it was important to include in our budget.
How much additional money is being included for that? I know it was included in last year's budget, but as far as opposed to the previous system, only funding half of it, how much more money is that?
Don't quote me on exacts, but I want to say that it's, or don't hold me to the exacts. You can quote me, obviously, but I think it's $125 million.
Each year?
Yes.
Per pupil SEEK funding is up, but perhaps not the total amount of SEEK funding compared to current numbers. Does the House budget provide fewer real dollars for base SEEK allotments? And if so, are school districts to make up the difference?
I don't know how you could draw that conclusion. The fact of the matter is SEEK allotment is increasing from $4,000 per pupil to $4,100. We're also dramatically increasing school transportation funds as well as school construction funds. So I'm not sure how you could draw that conclusion.
With the redistricting bills today, I do want to ask about what happened with Senate Bill 3. I know that there was some contention with the vote, whether or not, Representative Graham had enough time to, press the buzzer and say he wanted to speak. I know he got a chance to speak anyways after the vote, but what exactly happened there?
Well, it was the normal process where, when the motion is made, I will make my normal motion, which is that motion has been made and seconded, and ask if there's any discussion. There was probably a 10 or 15 second dead air pause. I think if you go back and look at the footage, and so I assumed that no one wanted to speak. No buttons were pushed, no lights were lit up. So I called for the roll. The roll call was open. So at that point in time, you can't really undo the beginning of the roll call vote. So I told him I would give him grace and leeway in the explanation of vote. Usually that's limited, but I told him I wouldn't limit him if he had comments. But I didn't really want to go back through the closing of the board and the withdrawal of the motion just to let him say what he was going to say anyway.
And I know that there's been some discussion on the floor and also kind of online since the breakdown of the racial demographics and the proposed map have come out, talking about how none of these districts have a majority black population. I know the discussion on the floor was about majority minority districts, but there's been some discussion about whether or not that's a Voting Rights Act violation because none of these districts have a majority black population. Can you respond to that?
It's my understanding that it isn't, and I'll direct legal questions to attorneys. But we consulted with legal scholars not only from Kentucky but from around the country on this plan to make sure that it complied with everything. And the fact of the matter is, there were not any majority black districts as with that definition in the existing map that we currently represent. That we're currently serving in, and there are none coming out if you strictly look at voting age population. If you look at overall population, it changes. So I think that there's maybe some misunderstandings about using terminology in certain situations that may not necessarily technically be the correct terminology, but I'm confident that the plan meets all legal and constitutional muster, as well as complying with the Voting Rights Act.
HB1 doesn't cover tornado relief. How do House Republicans plan to cover tornado relief?
We introduced House Bill 5 today, which was a separate bill, and the reason for that is strictly for expediency. There were, in our discussions with the governor and the administration, there have been a number of things that they wanted to do certainly more quickly than we can get a budget passed. So we set the framework, which was one reason we were late. We were waiting on that bill to get finished up with the bill drafters. That sets up the framework of appropriating $200 million, which is what the governor asked for, in a number of different methods and manners for a number of different purposes. And we will we will continue that process throughout the session. We were able to identify and firm up a couple of areas where we could go ahead and deploy those dollars right now. We can do it upon the governor's signature next week when we pass that bill, but this will probably be a series of 5 or 6 implementations of what we filed today in House Bill 5.
Absent the questions of constitutionality and whether the rules were followed, what do you say to Democrats who call these maps unfair when you guys already have a 75-25 majority and the state presidentially votes about 62-63%?
Right. There's always going to be questions of politics in redistricting. The vast majority of redistricting is controlled by math and law. Occasionally there are judgment calls. Contrary to what we heard repeatedly, which is why I went to the floor today to try to bring some reality back to what the process had been. They were consulted. They were asked for their input. A number of minority member legislators came to us, asked for certain things to be done. In most cases, we honored those requests and we'd made those changes. The fact of the matter is, the minority leadership was asked for their input. They were asked to draw maps. They were asked to submit maps. The one caveat that I gave them is, don't give me a map of one county. Don't give me a map of one district. Give me a map that takes the entire state, because everything it's a domino. You change one precinct in one district and you have a domino effect around the state. And they didn't do that. And so we made the best judgments we possibly could. I'm sure there are a lot of majority members that are quite unhappy about some of these maps. So, but they understood the process. They understood it was what we had to do, and that's how we did it. We did it as well as we could possibly do it, and I'm proud of the map. I'm proud of the work that went into it and the way it was done.
As far as the Western Kentucky bills, the tornado relief bills, do you have a dollar figure on how much money is involved in that?
The one that we filed today was a total appropriation of $200 million. Again, that will be released in tranches. So I want to say that the amount that we released today was $45 million. I'm almost positive it was the number that we came to, which was $15 million in temporary housing, another $30 million for school considerations. And that is because that's all we can identify at this point in time. There will be other things that bill stipulated were loss of revenues for local governments, insurance shortfalls for certain reconstruction measures, help for utilities to get utilities back up. But at this point in time, we can't really identify what those numbers are. As well as we can't identify at this point what the state's portion of the FEMA match will be. So as we find those numbers out, once we understand what those numbers are, then we will be supplementing House Bill 5 with additional legislative measures.
And what's the, as far as, because I know that the Senate is also introducing Senate Bill 5, which is a similar bill. Is this,
They're identical bills.
is this kind of following the same process you guys did in the special session?
Yes.
Just to get it
Yes.
through both
Well, we
chambers?
want to make sure that we do this expediently as possible. So yes.
So what's the game plan as far as getting it through? Is that going to happen next week?
Yes, is my hope that we will have it through next week. I can't imagine a scenario under which we won't. The Appropriations and Revenue Committee will meet on Monday to take that bill up.
Are they talking about that bill and HB1 or just that bill?
Just that one. I think. I haven't seen the agenda, actually. The two things I know that they're taking up are House Bill 5 and then House Concurrent Resolution 29, I believe it is, which is the extension of certain executive orders and emergencies for that entire relief effort. So.
One thing in House Bill 1, a $15,000 pay increase for Kentucky State Police troopers. Can you tell me a little bit about what's behind that?
Well, it's an urgent need. We have known for the last several years the difficulty of attracting and retaining state police officers. And we have spent literally the last 2 years trying to wrap our arms around how to tackle it. And it's actually two-pronged in that it gives a $15,000 increase, but it also makes an incredibly large cash infusion into the hazardous duty pension plan, which has a snowballing effect, because instead of the match, which is now 1.45% of payroll, it gets that match down to a much more manageable number, a much less arduous number. So you can actually ramp up and hire people and give raises, and it doesn't have that domino effect on the budget.
When we're on SEEK funding, obviously the per pupil number is up, but does the House bill provide fewer real dollars for SEEK accounts or SEEK funding?
I don't believe it does. I would, and again, Chairman Petrie got hung up at another meeting. I would defer that ultimate answer to him, but it's my understanding that overall dollars in K through 12 education is dramatically increased.
Senate Bill 1 was passed today, the bill dealing with SBDM councils. Is that a bill that you guys plan on taking up?
I'm sure we'll discuss it, Joe. We've been so focused this week on redistricting and getting the budget filed that frankly I haven't had a chance to really look at it.
Okay, we're good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.